The courtroom smelled like old wood and paper. I sat at the table with my hands folded, watching Judge Patricia Howard flip through documents. My lawyer Daniel sat beside me, calm as always. Across the room, Richard whispered something to his attorney. Behind him in the gallery, Vanessa crossed her legs and smiled like she was waiting for a show to start. I suppose she was. 15 years. That's how long I gave to that man. 15 years of waking up before dawn. 15 years of balancing books and chasing contracts and raising our daughter while he shook hands and took bows. And now here we were in this quiet courtroom, about to divide everything down the middle like cutting a cake. Richard thought he knew how this would end. I could tell by the way he leaned back in his chair. He thought I would walk away with a small settlement and a pat on the head. He thought I was the same quiet woman who nodded along and never complained. He was about to learn something new about me. Judge Howard looked up from her papers. Before I give my ruling, are there any final matters either party wishes to address? Richard's lawyer shook his head. Richard didn't even bother to look at me. Daniel stood up slowly. Your Honor, my client has one final piece of evidence she wishes to submit. Richard's head turned. For the first time all morning, he looked interested. Daniel walked forward and handed a white envelope to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The envelope was thin, plain. It looked like nothing, but I had spent 6 months filling it with everything. Judge Howard opened the envelope. She pulled out the papers inside and began to read. The courtroom went silent. I watched her face. First there was confusion. Then her eyebrows rose. Then the corner of her mouth twitched. And then she laughed. Not a small laugh. A real one. The kind that comes out when something surprises you so much you can't hold it in. Well, she said, still chuckling. This is certainly interesting. Richard sat up straight. His smile was gone. Vanessa's face went blank. And I just sat there, hands still folded, heart beating steady. This was the moment. But I should go back. I should tell you how we got here, to this courtroom, to this envelope, to the look on Richard's face that I will remember for the rest of my life. I should tell you about the night everything changed. It was a Tuesday, 6 months ago. I was standing in the kitchen making dinner, chopping onions for a stew that Richard used to love. The house was quiet. Mia was upstairs doing homework. The only sound was my knife against the cutting board. I heard the front door open. Richard's footsteps were heavy, the way they always were when he was in a mood. He walked into the kitchen, loosening his tie like it was choking him. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask about my day. He just stood there looking at me like I was a problem he needed to solve. Clara, he said, we need to talk. I set down the knife. Okay. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us. I picked up a towel and wiped my hands. I let the silence stretch. I could feel him watching me, waiting for tears, waiting for me to fall apart. I've been unhappy for a long time, he continued. His voice was practiced. He had rehearsed this. I think we've grown apart. I think we want different things. I nodded slowly. I see. I need someone who excites me, someone who inspires me. You understand, don't you? I almost laughed. After everything I had done for him, he needed to be inspired. After all the years I spent building his company from dust, he was bored. But I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything or scream or beg. I just said, when do you want to sign papers? Richard blinked. This was not the reaction he expected. Well, I've already talked to a lawyer. We can start the process next week. Fine. Fine? Yes, Richard, fine. He stood there for another moment, confused. I think he wanted a fight. I think he wanted me to give him a reason to feel like the victim. But I gave him nothing. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, I said. We can tell Mia together tomorrow. He nodded and left the kitchen. I heard him go upstairs. I heard him moving around in our bedroom, probably packing a bag to take to Vanessa's apartment. I knew about her. I had known for over a year. I went back to chopping onions. My hands were steady. That night, after the house went quiet, I sat on the guest room bed and made a phone call. "Daniel Reeves," said the voice on the other end. "Mr. Reeves, my name is Clara Bennett. My husband just asked me for a divorce." "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Bennett." "Don't be," I said. "I've been expecting it. I need a lawyer who can help me protect what's mine." There was a pause. "What do you have?" "Everything. Every contract I wrote, every account I managed, every lie he told. I've been keeping records for 3 years." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mrs. Bennett, can you come to my office tomorrow?" "I'll be there at 9. I hung up and sat in the dark. I thought about the life I had built. Not just the house, not just the company, the life. The early mornings and late nights. The deals I closed while Richard played golf. The clients who trusted me while he took credit. The money I saved while he spent. He thought I was furniture. Something old and familiar that he could replace when he wanted something newer. He was wrong. I got up and opened my laptop. I started transferring files from my backup drive. Contracts, bank statements, emails, photos of receipts for gifts I never received. Evidence of accounts I was not supposed to know about. It took 2 hours to organize everything. By the time I finished, the folder was thick with proof. I closed the laptop and looked at myself in the mirror, the same face I had seen for 42 years, a little older, a little tired, but the same. Richard saw an old woman who had nothing without him. I saw a woman who had been paying attention. I whispered to myself, quiet so no one could hear. "You think you know me, Richard. You don't know anything." The next morning, I went to Daniel's office with my folder. He was a tall man with grey hair and sharp eyes. He had been practicing family law for 30 years. He had seen everything. But when he opened my folder and started reading, his eyebrows went up. "How long have you been preparing this?" he asked. "Long enough." He flipped through more pages. Bank records, contracts with my signature. Proof of hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands. Evidence that Richard had already started moving money where he thought I wouldn't find it. Daniel looked up at me. He almost smiled. "Mrs. Bennett, I have to ask, why did you stay so long if you knew all this?" I thought about the question. I thought about Mia, about the company, about the years I spent building something real. "Because I needed to be ready," I said. "And now I am." Daniel closed the folder and nodded. "Then let's get you what you deserve." I met Richard when I was 26 years old. He was working at a construction site, hauling lumber in the summer heat. I was walking past on my way to the bank where I worked as a teller. He whistled at me. I ignored him. He did it again the next day, and the next. On the 4th day, he was waiting on the sidewalk with a cup of coffee. "I figured you might need this," he said. "You walk fast. Must be tiring." I took the coffee. It was terrible, bitter and burned, but he was smiling so wide, like he had won something just by getting me to stop. That was Richard back then. Charming, persistent, full of dreams he couldn't afford. We got married a year later. Small ceremony at the courthouse. My mother cried. His father didn't come. We moved into a tiny apartment with a leaky faucet and a view of a parking lot. Richard was still working construction for someone else, coming home with sawdust in his hair and big plans in his head. "I'm going to start my own company," he told me one night. We were eating dinner on our second-hand couch because we didn't have a table yet. Bennett Construction. "I just need a little money to get started." "How much?" $20,000. I almost choked on my food. We had maybe $2,000 in savings. Richard made $12 an hour. But I looked at him, at the fire in his eyes, and I believed him. I believed he could build something if someone just gave him the chance, so I gave him the chance. I went to the bank where I worked and asked for a loan. They laughed at me. A 26-year-old teller with no collateral wanting $20,000 for her husband's dream. They said no. So I found another bank. And another. I put on my best dress and my best smile, and I walked into every bank in the city. I brought a business plan I wrote myself. I brought projections and budgets and timelines. I learned words like equity and cash flow and return on investment. On my 9th try, a banker named Mr. Patterson leaned back in his chair and looked at me for a long time. "You really believe in this husband of yours?" "I believe in the plan," I said, "and I believe in the work. We'll pay back every cent." He gave us the loan. I came home that night with a check for $20,000. Richard picked me up and spun me around the kitchen. He called me his lucky charm. He said we were going to be rich. We weren't rich for a long time. Those first years were brutal. Richard would bid on jobs and lose. He would start projects and run out of money. He made mistakes, hired the wrong people, trusted the wrong suppliers. But I was there. Every single day. I taught myself bookkeeping from library books. I learned how to file permits and negotiate contracts. I woke up at 5 in the morning to answer emails and went to bed at midnight after balancing the accounts. When Richard was out on job sites, I was in our spare bedroom running the business. I was the one who got us our first big contract. A developer named Mr. Simmons needed someone to build a small office complex. Richard met with him and stumbled through the pitch. I could see Mr. Simmons losing interest. So I stepped in. "Mr. Simmons," I said, "let me show you the numbers." I walked him through the budget, the timeline, the materials. I answered every question he had. By the end of the meeting, he was nodding. "I'll admit," he said, I was ready to walk out. "But you know what you're talking about, Mrs. Bennett." He signed the contract that day. Richard was grateful at first. He thanked me. He said we were a team. But somewhere along the way, he started to forget. He started telling people he built the company himself. He started introducing me as just his wife. I didn't correct him. I was too busy working. The company grew. We moved into a real office. We hired employees. We bought a house with a big kitchen and a yard for the daughter I was carrying. Richard bought his first suit, then his first expensive watch, then his first car that cost more than our old apartment. I watched him change. It happened slowly, like water wearing a waystone. The man who used to bring me burned coffee started coming home late. The man who used to spin me around the kitchen started looking at me like I was in the way. He joined a golf club. He went to parties I wasn't invited to. He started criticizing the way I dressed, the way I talked, the way I looked. "You should try harder," he said once. "You've let yourself go." I was working 14 hours a day. I was raising our daughter. I was keeping his company from falling apart while he played golf with clients and took 2-hour lunches. But sure, I had let myself go. Mia saw it too. My daughter was smart, too smart for her own good sometimes. She stopped bringing friends to the house because Richard either ignored her or found something to criticize. Her room was too messy. Her grades should be higher. Her music was too loud. One day when Mia was 12, she came to me with something in her hand. A small earring, gold with a tiny diamond. "I found this in Dad's car," she said. "It's not yours." My heart cracked. Not because of the earring. I already knew about the other woman by then. But because my daughter knew. Because she had to carry that weight. I took the earring and put it in my pocket. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. What are you going to do?" I looked at my daughter. She had my eyes, serious and watchful. "I'm going to handle it," I said, "when the time is right." She nodded. She trusted me. I kept the earring. I added it to the folder I had started, the folder full of receipts and bank statements and late-night emails, the folder that grew thicker every month. 2 years before Richard asked for the divorce, he hired Vanessa. She was young, 27, blonde hair and big smile and tight dresses. He said he needed a personal assistant to manage his schedule. I said nothing. I watched them, the way she laughed at his jokes, the way he leaned close when he talked to her, the way he started going to the office on Saturdays when he never had before. I found hotel receipts in his coat pocket. I found text messages on our shared phone bill. I found a charge for jewelry at a store I had never been to. I documented everything. People asked me why I stayed, why I didn't leave right then, why I let it continue. because I was building a case, because I knew that if I left too soon, he would hide everything and I would get nothing, because I needed to be ready. And because some part of me, some small stupid part, still remembered the man who brought me bad coffee on a sidewalk and looked at me like I was everything. That man was gone, but the memory took time to bury. 6 months before the divorce, I made my first appointment with Daniel Reeves. I sat in his office with my folder, 3 years of evidence, every piece of proof that I was not just a wife but a partner, a founder, an equal. Daniel read through everything. His face was calm, but I could see the surprise in his eyes. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, "your husband is hiding money, a lot of it. If we can prove this in court, it changes everything." "I know. He's been planning this divorce for a while, moving assets where he thinks you can't find them." "I know that too." Daniel closed the folder and looked at me. "How long have you been preparing for this?" I thought about the years of silence, the years of watching, the years of being invisible while I kept my eyes open. "Long enough," I said. Daniel nodded slowly. "Then let's get you what you deserve." The day Richard moved out, he took his golf clubs and his expensive watches and left everything else behind. He said I could keep the furniture. He said it like he was doing me a favor. "I'll send someone for the rest later," he said, standing in the doorway with his suitcase. "Try not to make this difficult, Clara." I nodded and said nothing. I had learned that silence was my best weapon. He moved into a luxury apartment downtown. I knew because I saw the lease agreement in our bank records. 2 bedrooms, city view, rooftop pool. The rent was $4,000 a month. He put it under the company's name so it wouldn't look like marital spending. I documented it and added it to the folder. Within a week, Vanessa moved in with him. She posted photos on social media, the 2 of them at fancy restaurants, the 2 of them at wine tastings, the 2 of them on a weekend trip to the coast. She called him her soulmate. She said she had never been so happy. I saw every post. I saved every photo. Mia saw them too. She came to me one night with her phone in her hand, her face tight with anger. "Look at this," she said. "He's posting like he's on vacation. Like we don't even exist." I took the phone and looked at the photo. Richard and Vanessa on a beach, holding cocktails, smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. The caption said, "New beginnings." "He's trying to hurt you," Mia said. "He wants you to see this." "I know, sweetheart. Aren't you angry?" I looked at my daughter. She was 14, but she looked older in that moment. She had seen too much. "I'm angry," I said. "But anger doesn't win. Patience wins. Evidence wins." Mia didn't look convinced, but she nodded. I handed back her phone. "Don't look at his posts anymore. It will only make you feel bad." "What about you?" "I have to look," I said. "I'm building something." She didn't ask what. She trusted me. Richard got bolder as the weeks passed. He started telling people his version of the story. He told our friends that I was cold and distant. He told his business partners that I had never really been involved in the company. He told anyone who would listen that he had carried me for 15 years, and now he was finally free. The lies spread fast. People I thought were my friends stopped calling. Couples we used to have dinner with suddenly only invited Richard. I became invisible all over again. One night I ran into Margaret Chen at the grocery store. She and her husband used to come to our house for barbecues. She saw me in the produce section and her face went stiff. "Clara," she said, "how are you holding up?" "I'm fine, Margaret, thank you." She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "I heard what happened. Richard told us everything. I'm so sorry it didn't work out." "What did he tell you?" Margaret looked uncomfortable. "Just that you two grew apart, that you weren't supportive of his career, that you—" She trailed off. "That I what?" "That you let yourself go." There it was again. The same words. I had let myself go, as if I was a house that needed maintenance, as if I was something Richard owned that had fallen into disrepair. I smiled at Margaret. Richard sees what he wants to see. He always has. She didn't know what to say to that. I said goodbye and walked away. A month after he moved out, Richard threw a party at his new apartment, a celebration of his freedom, he called it. He invited all his business contacts, all his golf buddies, all the people who had decided I wasn't worth knowing anymore. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it. Someone recorded a video. I don't know who sent it to me. The email came from an address I didn't recognize, but I watched it. The apartment was full of people holding champagne glasses. Richard stood in the middle of the room with his arm around Vanessa. She was wearing a red dress and diamonds I had never seen before. Richard raised his glass. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. This is a new chapter for me, a fresh start. For too long I was held back by someone who didn't believe in me, but now I have someone who inspires me, someone who sees my potential. He looked at Vanessa and kissed her. Everyone clapped. Then someone off camera shouted, "What about Clara?" Richard laughed. Clara was fine when I needed someone to answer phones, but Vanessa is my future. More laughter, more clapping. I watched the video 3 times. I saved it to my folder. 2 weeks later, Richard came to the house to collect some of his things. He said he needed files from his home office. I said fine. But he didn't come alone. He brought Vanessa with him. I was in the kitchen when I heard the front door open. I heard Richard's voice and then another voice. Higher. Younger. I walked out and there she was, standing in my living room, looking around like she was inspecting a property she might buy. "So this is it," Vanessa said. She wrinkled her nose. "It's very traditional." "It's outdated," Richard said. "I told her for years we should renovate, but she never wanted to spend the money." I stood in the doorway and watched them. Vanessa picked up a photo from the shelf. It was our wedding picture. She looked at it and smirked. "You look so young here," she said to Richard. "So handsome." "I was young," he said. "Too young to know what I really wanted." Vanessa put the photo down and turned to me. "I hope there are no hard feelings, Clara. Richard and I didn't plan for this to happen. Sometimes love just finds you." I said nothing. Richard walked toward his office but stopped next to me. He leaned close so Vanessa couldn't hear. "She's too old and dirty for me anyway," he said quietly. "That's what I tell people when they ask why I left. You understand?" He smiled and walked past me. I stood there for a moment. My hands were shaking, but my face was still. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Vanessa followed Richard to the office, her heels clicking on my floors. I heard them laughing about something. I heard drawers opening and closing. When they came back out, Richard was carrying a box of files. Vanessa was carrying nothing, but she looked pleased with herself. "Thanks for being reasonable about all this," Richard said. "I know it's not easy." I looked at him. The man I had married. The man I had built a company for. The man who called me old and dirty when he thought no one was listening. "You're welcome," I said. They left. I closed the door softly behind them. I walked to my office and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. I pulled out the folder and added a new note. Vanessa's visit. Richard's words. The way they laughed in my home. Then I called Daniel. "They came to the house," I said. "He brought her with him. How did it go?" "They're making this easy," Daniel laughed on the other end of the phone. "They always do. The arrogant ones always think they're untouchable." "When do we go to court?" 6 more weeks. We're almost there, Clara. Just hold on a little longer." I hung up and looked at the folder. It was thick now, full of everything Richard thought I would never find, full of every lie and every insult and every dollar he tried to hide. 6 more weeks. I could wait. I had been waiting for years. The courthouse was cold. I remember that. The air conditioning was too strong and I wished I had brought a sweater. But I sat straight in my chair and kept my hands folded on the table and I did not shiver. Daniel sat beside me, calm, as always. He had a yellow legal pad in front of him, but he barely looked at it. He knew the case by heart. We both did. Across the room, Richard sat with his lawyer, a man named Gregory Shaw, who charged $800 an hour and had a reputation for winning. Richard had hired him because he was expensive. Richard always thought expensive meant best. Behind Richard, in the first row of the gallery, Vanessa sat with her legs crossed and her chin high. She was wearing a white dress like she was going to a wedding. Maybe she thought she was. Maybe she thought this was the day she became the next Mrs. Bennet. She smiled at me when I looked at her, a small, pitying smile, like she felt sorry for me. I turned back around and faced the front. Judge Patricia Howard entered and we all stood. She was a tall woman with silver hair and glasses that she wore on a chain around her neck. She had been a judge for 30 years. She had seen every trick and every lie. I liked her immediately. "Be seated," she said. We sat. The hearing began. Gregory Shaw went first. He painted a picture of Richard as a self-made man. A hard-working entrepreneur who built a construction empire from nothing. A generous husband who had supported his wife for 15 years. A reasonable man who simply wanted to end his marriage peacefully and fairly. "My client is not asking for anything extraordinary," Shaw said. "He is asking for an equitable division of assets based on his contributions to the marriage." Mrs. Bennet was a homemaker. She did not work outside the home. She did not contribute to the growth of Bennet Construction. She should receive a fair settlement, of course, but Mr. Bennet should retain control of the business he built with his own hands. I listened to every word. I kept my face still. Shaw presented documents. Financial statements showing Richard as the sole decision-maker. Tax returns with only his name on them. Testimonials from business partners who said they had never seen me at meetings. It was a good performance. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed it. When Shaw finished, Daniel stood up. "Your Honour," he said, "we will present a very different picture of this marriage." Daniel started slow. He talked about the early years, the loan I secured to start the company, the contracts I wrote, the clients I brought in. He showed documents with my signature, emails where I negotiated deals, bank records where I managed the accounts. Richard shifted in his seat. He whispered something to Shaw. Daniel kept going. He showed the court that I was not a homemaker. I was a co-founder. I was the person who kept the company running while Richard shook hands and played golf. I was the one who woke up at 5 in the morning and went to bed at midnight. Judge Howard listened carefully. She took notes. She asked questions. "Mrs. Bennet," she said, "why is your name not on the company registration?" I stood up. "Because Richard said it would be simpler to have one name on the paperwork. He said it was just a formality. He said we were partners, no matter what the documents said." "And you believed him?" "I did, Your Honour. For a long time I did." She nodded and wrote something down. Daniel presented more evidence. The hotel receipts, the jewellery charges, the text messages. Proof that Richard had been having an affair for at least 2 years. Proof that he had used marital funds to pay for it. Vanessa's smile faded. Richard's face was getting red. He whispered to Shaw again, more urgently this time. But Daniel wasn't finished. "Your Honour," he said, "we have evidence that Mr. Bennet has been hiding assets from this court." The room went quiet. Shaw stood up. "Objection. This is speculation." "It's not speculation," Daniel said. "We have documentation." Judge Howard looked at Daniel over her glasses. "What kind of documentation?" "Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, property purchased under a shell company, money that should be part of the marital estate but was deliberately concealed." Richard stood up. "That's a lie." Shaw grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. "Your Honour, my client denies these allegations." Judge Howard held up her hand. "I'll see the evidence." Daniel nodded at me. This was the moment. I reached into my bag and pulled out the white envelope. I had carried it with me every day for a month. I had checked it every night to make sure everything was there. 3 years of work, 15 years of marriage, all of it in one envelope. Daniel took it from me and walked to the bench. He handed it to the bailiff, who handed it to Judge Howard. She opened it. I watched her face as she read. First there was concentration, then surprise, then something else. Something like admiration. And then she laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was the laugh of someone who has seen something unexpected, something clever. "Well," she said, still looking at the papers, "this is certainly interesting." Richard's face went white. Shaw leaned over, trying to see what was in the envelope. Richard grabbed his arm and whispered frantically. Judge Howard held up the first document. "Mr. Bennett, this is a contract from 2012. It's for the Morrison office complex. Your wife's signature is on it as co-founder of Bennett Construction. Did you know about this?" Richard stammered. That was just... And this," she held up another paper, "is a bank statement from an account in the Cayman Islands. It shows deposits totaling over $2 million in the past 18 months. Is this your account?" "Your Honor, I can explain." "And this," she held up a third document, "is a signed affidavit from your former accountant. He states that you instructed him to hide assets specifically to avoid sharing them with your wife during the divorce. He was fired when he raised concerns about the legality of this." Richard looked like he was going to be sick. Shaw stood up. "Your Honor, we need time to review these documents. We were not given proper notice." "You were given notice," Daniel said calmly. "These documents were submitted to the court 3 days ago as required. If Mr. Shaw did not review them, that is his oversight." Judge Howard looked at Shaw. "Is that true? You received these documents?" Shaw's face tightened. "We received a large file, Your Honor. We did not have adequate time." 3 days is adequate time to read a file, Mr. Shaw." She turned back to Richard. She removed her glasses and let them hang from the chain around her neck. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "I want to be very clear about something. Hiding assets during divorce proceedings is fraud. It is a crime. Do you understand that?" Richard opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "I have seen a lot of things in my 30 years on this bench," Judge Howard continued. "Lies, tricks, schemes. But this level of arrogance is something special. You thought your wife was invisible. You thought she wasn't paying attention. You thought you could hide millions of dollars and she would never know." She held up the envelope. She knew everything. And now so do I." Richard looked at me. For the first time since this whole thing started, he really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. Judge Howard put her glasses back on and picked up her pen. "Let's talk about consequences," she said. Judge Howard did not rush. She read through every document in the envelope, one by one, while the courtroom sat in silence. Richard stared at the table in front of him. His hands were clasped together so tight his knuckles were white. Shaw kept whispering to him, but Richard wasn't listening anymore. Vanessa had stopped smiling. She sat very still in the gallery, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the back of Richard's head. I wondered if she was calculating how much this would cost her. I wondered if she was already planning her exit. Finally, Judge Howard set down the papers and looked at Richard. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "I'm going to be very direct with you. You have lied to this court. You have hidden assets. You have committed fraud. These are serious offences. Do you understand the position you are in?" Richard's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client maintains that these accounts were business investments, not marital assets. We will need time to—" "Sit down, Mr. Shaw." Shaw sat. Judge Howard turned back to Richard. "I asked you a question. Do you understand the position you are in?" Richard swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. Then let me explain what happens now." She picked up her pen and began writing as she spoke. "Based on the evidence presented, I am ruling in favour of Mrs. Bennett. The hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands, the property purchased under shell companies, and all other concealed assets will be included in the marital estate and divided accordingly." Richard closed his eyes. "Furthermore," she continued, "because Mr. Bennett deliberately attempted to defraud this court and deprive his wife of her rightful share, I am awarding Mrs. Bennett 70% of all marital assets. This includes her share of Bennett Construction, which she helped build from the ground up. 70%. I let the number sink in. After everything he had taken from me, I was getting 70%. Additionally, Judge Howard said, Mr. Bennett will pay spousal support for a period of 10 years, as well as all legal fees incurred by Mrs. Bennett during these proceedings. Shaw stood up again. Your Honor, this is excessive. My client has rights. Your client committed fraud, Mr. Shaw. His rights are limited by his actions. Sit down. Shaw sat down for the last time. Judge Howard looked at Richard. I am also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges. Perjury, fraud, tax evasion. You may want to find yourself a good criminal defense attorney, Mr. Bennett. You're going to need one. Richard's face had gone from white to grey. He looked like a man watching his life collapse in front of him. Judge Howard signed the document in front of her and handed it to the clerk. This court is adjourned. She stood and left the room. Everyone else stood too, but nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I turned to Daniel. He was smiling. Congratulations, Clara, he said quietly. You did it. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak yet. Outside the courthouse, the sun was too bright. I stood on the steps and let my eyes adjust. I could hear Richard behind me, arguing with Shaw. I could hear Vanessa's heels clicking as she walked away without saying goodbye to anyone. Then Richard was beside me. Clara! I turned to face him. He looked smaller somehow. Older, his expensive suit didn't fit right anymore. You planned this, he said. His voice was shaking. You set me up. This whole time, you were setting me up. I looked at him. This man I had loved, this man I had built a life with, this man who had called me old and dirty and invisible. I didn't set you up, Richard. I just paid attention while you ignored me. You thought I was furniture. You thought I was nothing. But I was watching. I was always watching. I'll appeal, he said. I'll fight this. You can try, but the evidence is clear. You hid money. You lied under oath. You committed fraud. No appeal is going to change that. His jaw tightened. I gave you everything, that house, that life. You would be nothing without me. I almost laughed. After everything, he still believed it. Richard, I said, you gave me nothing. I built that company. I raised our daughter. I kept everything running while you took credit and played golf. You didn't give me a life. I made one. And now I'm taking what's mine. He stared at me. I think he was finally seeing me. Really seeing me for the first time in years. You'll regret this, he said. No, I said. I won't. I turned and walked down the courthouse steps. I didn't look back. Mia was waiting for me at home. She was sitting on the porch steps watching for my car. When I pulled into the driveway, she ran to meet me. What happened? She asked. Did we win? I hugged her. I held her tight and breathed in the smell of her shampoo, and I let myself feel it. The relief, the victory, the end of something and the beginning of something else. We won, sweetheart. We won. She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were wet. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the earrings sooner. I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I touched her face. You didn't have to. I knew. Mothers always know. She hugged me again. We stood there in the driveway for a long time holding each other. 6 months later, I started a new business. Not construction this time, consulting. I help women who are going through divorces. I help them understand their rights, their assets, their worth. I help them see that they are not invisible, even when their husbands try to make them feel that way. My first client was a woman named Patricia. She sat in my office with her hands shaking and her voice small. Her husband had told her she was nothing without him. He had told her she would never survive on her own. I don't know what to do, she said. I don't know where to start. I smiled at her. I poured her a cup of coffee. Let me tell you a story, I said. Richard Bennett lost his company. He lost his money. He lost his freedom when the criminal charges went through. Last I heard, he was working at a hardware store and living in a one-bedroom apartment across town. Vanessa left him before the trial even started. I don't think about him much anymore. I think about Mia, who is graduating high school next year. I think about my clients who come to me broken and leave standing tall. I think about the life I am building now, on my own terms with my own name on every document. Some people think my story is about revenge. It isn't. It's about paying attention. It's about knowing your worth. It's about waiting until the time is right, and then taking what belongs to you. Richard saw an old woman who had let herself go. I saw a woman who had been building something all along. Some endings are just beginnings in disguise.